Hello, my friends. So, in today's podcast episode, we are going to talk about exactly what I did to earn $854,316 in the year 2025. And never would I ever have thought that that amount was possible 5 years ago when I first started my own Instagram page and my own private practice. At the time, I was engaged, I was getting ready to get married, and I was really scared to go out on my own because I didn't know what I was going to do in terms of taking time off for my honeymoon. I'd been at my nonprofit job for several years now and had accumulated a lot of paid time off that I was saving up for my honeymoon. And I was so freaked out of like, if I leave the stability of my 9 to 5, I'm not going to be making money in a honeymoon. How am I going to be able to do this? Maybe I should wait until afterwards to leave my job. And obviously, it ended up being the best decision. I earned way more in my first year in private practice than I did at the nonprofit and more than paid for my honeymoon. But it's wild kind of like reflecting back on that now I'm also fully funding a 16-week maternity leave that I took in 2025 and simultaneously still having like so much financial success in the process. $854,000 is an insane amount of money. And I just want to like name that and say that I am so freaking proud. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about all the different income sources that it took to get there, the main expenses in my business, the profit margin, and how that compares to my first year in business when I was just doing one on one therapy, what time off and work life balance has looked like for me, and a few really important lessons learned that I hope that you can apply no matter where you're at in building your business. Okay, so let's get into it. A few important numbers I want to go over in terms of income. So, my biggest revenue source for the year was my course, the Private Practice Academy Bundle. And this is a self paced program. It's about 20 hours of pre recorded lessons, and it walks therapists through step by step by step everything that they need to create their own private practice, get private pay clients, grow an Instagram page, scale beyond one on one therapy, and earn well into the six figures. And that program alone was about 32% of my revenue, which is amazing, right? A third of my business is coming from a self paced course that requires no delivery time from me. Next up, I have two other revenue sources that are tied with 23% each. So, first is the Reels membership, and that brought in $199,000. And the Reels membership is a monthly membership where therapists sign up and they get content ideas from me delivered to their inbox every single Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so the way that this works is I plan out Reels ideas for the week for them, and I use like 4 different styles of Reels. I give them the trending audio, I give them a fill in the blank script, I give them filming instructions, examples of what this can look like to really make content quite easy for them. We have about 800 members active, and it's a combination of people on a monthly membership and an annual membership. And then we also have some folks on free trials who get this as a bonus when they sign up for my course, the Private Practice Academy bundle that we just talked about. So, all in all, that has earned close to $200,000 this past year, which is really amazing. What I love about this is it's not passive, right? Like every single week, I am planning the Reels ideas and we are having to deliver that to people, but it is super scalable. So, when I started this membership, I had no members, and then I had like 10 members, 20 members, 100 members. And as I've grown to over 800 members, the time required of me to come up with the prompts has not changed, right? Of course, there's been a bigger investment in team in terms of like customer service and admin and making sure that people, get access to their membership and their membership is removed when they canceled and all of that. But in terms of my time, it is very scalable with little to no extra effort, no matter how many extra members we bring in. The next revenue stream is also at 23%, $200,000, is brand deals, which is really cool. Brand deals to me are like the funnest part of my job. They're the part that feels the most like a hobby versus actual work. And so it's so cool to see brand deals bringing in $200,000 in 1 year. And I think that something I want to note here is that this number is up quite a bit from last year. It's actually increased $80,000 year over year, which is amazing. And that has been very largely due to this podcast and getting sponsors here, which is really cool. So right now I have monetized my Instagram. Occasionally I'll send sponsored newsletters as well, and then the podcast. And so it's really cool. I work with a lot of long-term brand partners who are like kind of doing multi-channel marketing with me, right? And so they might have an ad spot on the podcast. They might also get social content. They might occasionally get newsletters. And so I'm able to talk about the same few brands really consistently with my audience, which is one, amazing for the brands, right? Because the payoff is really good. I'm building trust with my audience over time and recommending the same service again and again and again. And so we get really high conversions, and the brands are really happy with the return on investment there, which is, how I continue to secure long-term partnerships with these. But it's also really good for me because it means that I'm not having to constantly pitch brands, negotiate, understand new brands, do market research for them. I'm able to just know, okay, this is like a core part of what I talk about. Is the core thing that I quote unquote sell to people. And I'm getting paid like a flat monthly fee versus an affiliate, which is really nice. Okay, next in terms of largest revenue stream is one-on-one business coaching. And this I only did for the first half of 2025 from January till June, and it brought in $84,000 and was about 10% of my overall income for the year. And I have absolutely loved doing one-on-one business coaching. I primarily do it with therapists who've already filled their practice. They already have a full caseload. They've scaled to 6 figures. They feel good about where they're at with Instagram. And they usually have like other offers that are selling. They're doing some brand deals, but they're wanting to really scale this and find a way to do it smarter, to work less hard, less intensely, to build a team, to sort of create more of a business that requires less of them, so that way they're able to scale. And that is work I really, really enjoyed doing. But when I got pregnant last year, I decided I was going to stop doing any one-on-one work in June. So that way I had a few months to prepare for my maternity leave, because the one-on-one work is obviously very like time intensive on my part. So I think it's really cool to see this earning $84,000 with only 6 months of the year. Next up is my VIP coaching, and this is for therapists that are alumni of the Private Practice Academy bundle. And I have a coaching community there. We meet twice per month for group coaching calls, and then they also get daily messaging access with me. We have a forum where they can ask questions, and I respond to every single question personally every single day. And so that's a lot of fun. It's really cool. That's like a newish offer. I launched that maybe like a year and a half ago. And it's really been nice to get to work with a therapist in the Private Practice Academy bundle more closely and have the opportunity to give them feedback, to help them with implementation, to help them with accountability as they are working on implementing what they're learning in the course. And so that has been really fun. And that earned $72,000 and was like 9% of revenue. And then lastly, the smallest portion is therapy. So that brought in about $21,000 in 2025 and was 3% of my revenue. And I will note that I also only did therapy for half of the year as part of my maternity leave planning process. So my baby was due in October. I ended up having him at the end of September, and I stopped seeing clients entirely in June to really prepare for maternity leave and just be able to rest some more too in my last trimester, which was really, really nice. So that is the breakdown of the different income sources. One thing I also want to know is that I was completely off from my son was born on September 21st. He came early. So from the day that he was born until the first week of January. And so I took a 16-week maternity leave. And during that time, in the months of October, November, and December, I earned $186,000. And I am so, so, so proud of that and really proud of my team for making that happen. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth in the episode about what went into that in terms of planning, what that looked like. But that was not a goal of mine. My goal going into maternity leave was really to be able to take time off and for the business to not crumble. And so to actually see $186,000 of revenue come in during that time is just so amazing. Okay, so let's talk about expenses. So expenses for the year were $380,888 and averaged $32,000 per month. And that is pretty high. That is the highest I've ever had expenses in my business. My profit margin was 55% for the year, meaning that for every dollar that I made, I got to keep 55 cents of it. And the total profit for the year was $473,428. So really cool to earn, not just earn, but like to take home almost $500,000 here from the business. But like I said, my expenses were like quite higher this year than they have been in the past. And that was an intentional choice for me as I prepared for maternity leave. I really, really, really wanted to invest in team. So that way my business could continue to run without me. So that way I could have time to prepare for maternity leave. So that way I could fully take time off and things would run without me. And so that way I could come back from maternity leave and have the ability to work less, because that was something I wanted to do as well, was not just like temporarily shift workload, but permanently really shift how much I was working. So that way I could be working like closer to part-time hours and have more time with my young son. So let's talk about sort of like the main biggest expenses. Number one, as I've sort of been alluding to, is team. So I paid my team $229,000 in 2025. And that was like very, very, very valuable money well spent for me, because every hour that they're working is an hour that I do not need to be working. And it would just be impossible for me to do everything myself at this point. I've done previous podcast episodes of everybody who's on my team, but that has changed over the years. So I'll give you a little rundown of who we have now. I have a full-time operations and marketing manager. And then I have a bunch of part-time folks. So I have a part-time social media manager who helps with like editing content and getting content posted. I have three part-time virtual assistants who help with things like inbox management, customer service, creating graphics, uploading trainings, that kind of stuff. And I have a podcast manager as well. My business coach was also a pretty high expense for me this year. So I paid $61,000 to my business coach. She has an interesting sort of like way that she charges. So she charges $1,250 per month, and then also charges 10% of any new revenue during our work together. So that number like really fluctuates depending on how much money I make. She makes more money and I pay her more money. I did take off with her at the end of the year when I had my son. And so that was helpful in reducing that expense. And she graciously held my spot for me, which I'm grateful for. Next up for big expenses is softwares. So I spent $29,000 on software this year. That is a little bit higher than usual because we transitioned project management systems and email platforms this year. So there was a little bit of like overlap and us upgrading to more expensive systems. But I am all for investing in softwares that it's going to make it faster for me to do my job or for my team to do their job, because overall that just saves us money and has the business be more organized. And then the last one I want to shout out is charitable contributions of $10,000. So I made a commitment to myself that I was going to minimum donate 1% of revenue every single year to charities that matter to me. And I did that over that amount this year. So the past 2 years, I've donated $10,000, which has felt really, really good, especially with the state of the world. To be able to like give money back in a tangible, meaningful way is so, so nice. And sometimes I'll do, these donations just like on my own, but oftentimes I'll actually use social media to do them as well. And I'll do these on my Instagram page, Sit with Kelly, when something bad is like happening in the world, and I will tell my audience that I will match their donations. And so that's been really fun of like, if I donated $10,000, maybe I did another $3,000 that came from my community on top of that, and that I was able to match. And so that's just like a fun way for me to allow my dollar to have more impact and to really use my influence for good and encourage other people to donate as well. So that has been really, really fun. Okay, so I want to talk about expenses and profit margin in a little more detail and compare that to my first year in business and last year when I was not going on a maternity leave, because I think that context is super, super helpful. I'm sure if you were just starting off, even if you're not just starting off, honestly, hearing that I spent $32,000 a month in my business probably feels bananas to you. And that would have felt bananas to me in the beginning as well. So my first year in business, my expenses averaged $3,700 per month, and my profit margin was 88%, right? So that is a huge, huge, huge difference in both profit margin, 55% currently versus 88% when I was doing one-on-one therapy. So I want to just sort of like acknowledge that. When you are first starting out, when you are just doing one-on-one, there's not that many expenses that you need. You're able to do a lot of the work yourself. You don't need a ton of like admin support, right? But as I've scaled with like more quote unquote passive offers, there's literally thousands of therapists who are being served in my business every day from my course and from my membership. And so there's a lot that goes into that with just like managing program access, managing customer information, having customer support inbox, like all of that. And so I've invested a lot more in team and softwares to make things easier as I've served more and more therapists. So that way I'm not getting bogged down in like the clunky admin stuff, and I'm able to focus on the things that I love doing and the things that really only I can do. Even though my profit margin has decreased substantially over the years, I think it's also worth noting the difference in take home pay, right? So, my first year as a therapist in private practice, I earned $255,000, had about $45,000 of expenses, and $210,000 in profit. Versus this year, I made about $854,000, $380,000 in expenses, and $473,000 in profit. So, I've more than doubled my profit still, while working much less even than I did my first year in private practice, which is amazing. I also want to compare this to last year. So in 2024 was actually my first $1 million year. And I am so, so, so grateful to myself that I pushed back on like the overachiever part of me who always wants to do more and do better and like continue to elevate myself. Because for this year, I think that my challenge and my desire was really not to have an even bigger business than the year before, right? My desire was to find a way to, work less, to have a baby, to be present, to relax. And that is exactly what I did. And so I did that by investing in more team, by taking more time off. Like it just in general, I worked a lot less in 2025 than I did in 2024. And I took off 16 weeks for my maternity leave, which is amazing, right? And so the flip of that is that I brought in less money. So my revenue went down $162,000 and my profit margin went down from 69% in 2024 to 55% in 2025. So overall, net, I took home $216,000 less dollars in 2025 than I did in 2024. And that feels so, so, so good to me, right? To be able to like take off a full 16 weeks with my family, to be able to work much, much less, to be able to have my business run without me and not just like maintain, right? But my business brought in $186,000 while I was on maternity leave. My business thrived while I was out, right? Because I've invested in team. And that doesn't just happen like overnight. There was a lot of advanced prepping that happened with that. There was a lot of content I created in advance before I went out on leave. There was a lot of launches that I did, and I planned everything before I went out on leave, which is part of why, I stopped doing one-on-one work in June, even though I didn't have my baby until the end of September, right? So I don't want to make it sound like this is just like snap your fingers and everything is done and it's perfect. It takes intentionality and planning. And it also takes like hard decisions and trade-offs. I think if you would ask me a few years ago, how would I feel if my business brought in 216,000 less dollars year over year? I'd be like, what? That's horrible. And now I'm like, that is exactly what I wanted, right? Like I wanted so badly to be able to take that time off and to not feel like my business always needed me. And that is now the business that I truly have today, which I'm so proud of. Okay, speaking of time off, so I think that this is always like fun to do and talk through in these annual income reports is what like the average work life has looked like for me. So since I started my practice, I've always been really big on prioritizing work-life balance. My first year in private practice, I worked 30-hour weeks, and that was like a way big improvement compared to what I was doing when I was at the nonprofit. I was probably working 40 or 50 hours a week. And then I was also working at a group practice and building my practice on my own on top of that. So being at 30-hour weeks since then has felt really, really nice. And that's where I was at for, most of the time since I started my private practice. Even as I've expanded into coaching and brand deals and all of that, I've kind of stayed at that 30-hour week. Now moving into 2026, I'm closer to like 20, 25 hours a week as I'm, showing up more for family and having like a young baby. So like 30-hour weeks is what 2025 looked like. Plus, I took off 16 weeks for my maternity leave and I got to travel a ton as well. So I spent a week in Brazil with my sister. I did a 2-week baby moon with my husband in Europe. We went to Panama and New York for weddings. We did like a little staycation in the Keys and just had a really good year. It was really, really nice. And I think that this is really important too, because as you are growing, especially as a therapist, it's important to realize that you are the most important asset in your business. If you are not well taken care of, you are not going to show up as a good therapist. Your clients are going to feel that and your business will suffer. And so making sure to prioritize a workload that feels good to you is really, really, really necessary. So I hope that you do that. Okay, so let's talk through some lessons learned. The first one I want to talk through is team and leadership. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this out of respect for different team members. But I had to do a lot of like team work in 2025. That was probably my biggest growth edge, was really prioritizing what felt good for me with my team, right? Finding a way for support that I was paying for to actually feel supportive and worth it, right? If I'm not holding a standard, if I am saying, well, I'm the business owner, so I should be the one to take this on for everything, then it's hard to feel really good in your business. And it's really, I think, became apparent to me last year that I was doing this as I was preparing for maternity leave. There was just like constant stuff that was coming up that I was like, if I was out of office, like this would be going to shit right now. And that did not feel okay to me. And so there was a lot of team changes of like people quitting, people firing, or me firing people. And so there was a lot of team changes, right? People quit. I had to fire people. I promoted other people. I hired new folks and really experimented with what level of support felt good, what felt sustainable, and what things I wanted to be doing in my business and what things I no longer was available to be doing. Right. And so for me, one of the things I'm no longer available for is project management. Like I cannot manage all of the little details that go into every single person on my team doing their job and everything coming together. And so I brought on and promoted a person on my team to be a full-time operations manager. And that is now her role, right? And she's doing amazing. And it's really nice to not have like the mental weight of that anymore and to know like, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do my part of recording this podcast, for instance, but I don't need to make sure that the podcast gets published and that I remember to make a reel about the podcast and that we have our ManyChat set up so we can send everybody the podcast link and that we put the podcast on my website, right? Like she is able to manage and make sure that all those pieces come to place. And that is really, really nice. And I hope that even if you are not at the stage of business where you're like, yeah, I need somebody to be making decisions like that, I hope that you do slow down and really think about like, what level of support do you want from people and what level of support do you expect? And for me, I think in order to do that, I needed to get a lot more clear and assertive with my feedback. And so I couldn't just like smile and say everything was all good and I'll just make the edits myself, right? I really needed to say, like, this is the third time I've told you a similar edit. Like, this does not feel good to me. How are you going to stop making this mistake moving forward? Right. And to hold that level of accountability, I think was really challenging for me at times, but it is what made such a difference and really allowed me to now have a team where I feel like I can trust them 100% and know that things are going to be done and they're going to be done well. My second big lesson learned for the year was finding a way to detach my worth from my success. Right. So I shared like, I wanted to really let the overachiever part of me go and not push myself to have another $1 million year in 2025 just because, right? Like I did not need the money financially of making $1 million in a year. Like, we are so good. We have so much savings from that, which I'm so grateful for. And so to me, I had to really get honest and say, if I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to go for that goal. It is purely for my ego. It is purely so that way I can feel successful. And instead, like, I wanted to define success not by how much money I made, but by how good it felt doing it. And to me, in this season, what has felt good is working less, being able to take time off, being able to have an easeful pregnancy where I was able to make time to work out, 4 or 5 times a week, where I was able to take naps when I wasn't feeling well, to be able to take a 16-week maternity leave, to be able to return to work and be able to keep my son home from daycare some days and spend extra time with him and leave at 3 p.m. every day to go pick him up. Like, that was so important to me. And like, by investing in team, by holding myself accountable, by planning in advance, I was able to do that. And for that reason, 2025 to me was much more successful than 2024. And I'm so proud of that. The last lesson is really the importance of like preparing and planning for your goals. So I think this idea of passive income is very fake and very like overhyped on Instagram, right? So like, I could make a post, and maybe I will, saying that I earned $186,000 while I was out on maternity leave. And that is true, right? It is a fact. And it gives the impression that now my business is just like so on autopilot that I'm able to literally be 100% offline with my baby and making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that's not the full story, right? And I think that that context is really important for me to share here, especially in the podcast. That took a lot of prep work in advance from me in particular, right? So not just like, oh, my team, but I also had to record podcasts for the whole time I was out. I had to plan content that then my team would edit and post for the whole time I was out. We had several launches in that time and planned email content in advance, planned social copy in advance. All of that was done. So that way those launches could operate while I was out, right? We had ongoing brand partnerships that I prepared content for in advance. So that way my team could put it together and it could get posted while I was out, right? So a lot of that is, it's work that I did. I just did it in advance, right? So I did that in June, July, August, early September before I had my son. So that way I could take off the rest of September, October, November, December, right? And I think that that is just like really worth noting, that you can decide what you want your business to look like. You can decide, if you're a one-on-one therapist, that you want to take off 6 weeks per year to go on vacation, to go to Europe, to spend time with your kids and not send them to summer camp, like whatever that is, you can decide it. It's just going to take some planning, right? So for you, maybe you decide to charge a higher fee so that way you're able to mix 6 weeks of sessions and still continue to pay yourself the same amount of money all year and make the amount of money that you want to earn, right? Like, I think that we always have to slow down and think about, what is it that I want and what decisions do I need to make to plan in advance to be able to get that. And to me, that is why like support is so, so, so important in your business, both with outsourcing and then also like getting a coach or getting a mentor or enrolling in a course or a program that will teach you, how do you do these things? Because could you do it on your own? Probably, right? But you're going to do it a lot faster when you have somebody showing you the way. I want to share a little bit about my business coach, just since that was like a big expense this year. And I think that she's been a huge part of my success. So I started my private practice in October 2020. And my first year in business was 2021. And I earned $255,000 that year. I had no business course. I had no business coach. I did it all myself. In 2022, I earned $350,000, still operating on my own, no business coach. Then in February 2023, I started working with my business coach, Lacey, and I brought in $700,000 that year, right? So I doubled my revenue in that year that I started working with her, which was amazing. In 2024, that went up to $1 million. So I increased $300,000 in revenue. And then we just talked about 2025, where I was able to earn $854,000 while taking off 16 weeks for maternity leave. So could I do it alone? Yes, I have. And I think that it's very possible if you're somebody who understands marketing, who understands business. But looking back, I would not do it alone again. like you're going to get there so much faster. You are going to feel so much better. You're going to feel so much more supported when you have somebody in your corner helping you to do this. And if you are looking for a business coach who specializes in helping therapists in particular, I am your girl. Like, join me in PPA, join me in the VIP community. I will help you get there. And the same thing goes with investing in team, right? Like, you do not need to be paying, your team $230,000 a year. Like, 100% no. But it probably makes sense for 99% of the people listening to this to have a virtual assistant in their business, right? If you hire a virtual assistant for $20 an hour to help you make graphics, to help you write Instagram captions, to help you write blog posts, to help you hit posts on Instagram, to help you edit your reels, like, you will get so much time back. Let's say you charge $200 an hour. You could outsource 10 hours of work per week for $200 for the cost of one session of yours, right? And I think that that is so, so, so important to let go of this idea that like only you can do it. You have to do it all. Like, that is so not true. Only you can see your clients, but almost everything else somebody can do. And there are things that I think you shouldn't outsource, right? Like, I probably wouldn't outsource somebody actually doing like the copy that's going to go in your reels. Like, your clients best. You should do that yourself. Maybe use the Reels membership or something to come up with ideas for that to make it really easy. But I wouldn't outsource like your voice. But there's a lot of admin and a lot of just like minutia that adds up in running a business, and that you should 100% outsource. It will save you so much time in the day, which will allow you to make more money and feel a lot better in your business. Okay, so to wrap up, I am really, really proud of myself, really proud of everything that I accomplished in 2025. When I started my very part-time private practice, I never even had the goal of going full-time in my business and replacing my 9-to-5 salary. I thought that that would be impossible. And I never, ever in a zillion years would have set a goal to make this kind of money. And I hope that this episode shows you that I am not special. I started at a place very similar to you and have built my business over time. You can have way more success than you think. And I don't deserve to be like on a pedestal for being here, right? I am not perfect. I do not have some magical secret. I just put one foot in front of the other, just like you. I've continued to make one hard decision after the next to voice what I need, to think about what I need, and to build intentionally and to grow. And over 5 years, I've built an absolutely amazing business that I could not be more proud of. And I'm also really, really proud of myself for deprioritizing work this year and simultaneously still being able to help hundreds of therapists build their own private practice, take on tons of new exciting opportunities, grow my Instagram, grow my podcast, give back to charities, and also make a fuck ton of money for myself and my family. So I hope that this episode has scratched an itch if you are somebody who is nosy like me and wants to see kind of behind the curtains in other people's businesses. I hope it has shown you what is possible. I hope it has inspired you to, whatever your goals are, raise them. You can go higher, you can earn more, you can take more time off, you can build a more balanced life. And I'm cheering for you every single step of the way. All right, talk to you soon, my friends.